Coming up is the first panel discussion of today with the experts from the investment sector who will be sharing with us their insights on the topic of sustainable investing, good for the world, bad for portfolio. Our panelists are Mr. Narongsak Plodmechai, Chief Executive Officer of SCB Asset Management Co Limited. Ms. Supaporn Leenabanchong, Managing Director of Krungsri Asset Management Co Limited. Ms. Thidasiri Srisamith, CFA, Chief Investment Officer of Kasikorn Asset Management Co Limited. Mr. Chakrit Puechpan, First Executive Vice President of MFC Asset Management Public Company Limited. And our moderator, Dr. Srikanya Yathip, Secretary General of Government Pension Fund.
Good morning. We are going to conduct this session in English. So this is a panel discussion on the topic of sustainable investing, good for the world, bad for portfolio. So as introduced, we have with us here Kun Narongsak from SCB Asset and Kun Supaporn from Krungsri Asset Management. Good morning. Kun Thidasiri from Kasikorn Asset Management and Kun Chakrit from MFC Asset Management. So a very good morning. Thank you for being here. So we have about 45 minutes. So let's now jump into the first question. So under the theme of our discussion, sustainable investment, good for the world, bad for portfolio, do you agree with this or not? And how? Let's start from Krungsri first. So I don't believe that, and I think that sustainable investment, whether it's on ESG, is going to lead to return on investment, definitely, because we believe that companies that have operate on ESG principle will have good performance in the long term. And there has been studies in a few years showing the sustainable investment with ESG criteria, and it's really delivering a positive performance. And a company with good ESG principle would really yield good performance and stable business. And companies with ESG have a very short-term risk. They won't be sued, won't get into litigation, and they have lower capital cost. And currently today, large funds have actually used ESG as criteria for investment. And therefore, companies with a good ESG principle could actually be part of these funds. And they're going to gain other benefits. The fund flows is going to come in. And through sustainable investment, and these funds, yield very good performance. For example, a sustainable global thematic, it's a master fund of KFESG that is they're able to gain a 20 to 23% gain per year. Or even the Thai CG, which is actually a fund focusing on good governance. We have actually gained 20% this year. So in conclusion, we don't believe that sustainable investing will be bad for the portfolio. It's actually on the opposite, that sustainable investment, aside from yielding good performance, we're going to gain risk benefits as well.
So that is very precise and clear that sustainable investing can really yield a long-term profit, and for Krungsri Asset Management, that is very clear. So I would like to ask this question to Kun Narongsak as well. And also, is there any other thing that you would like to add apart from what Kun Supaporn just said? Of course, thank you very much. So for me, I think ESG is something that happens in a long time before in other countries. And the overview of ESG. As for Thailand, we are quite behind in terms of the ESG implementation. But when we face with the rapid changes and also the climate crisis, I would say that this causes the mega trend that everybody is now focusing on this particular aspect, and also the implementation of ESG, and also how ESG can really provide us with the resilience for companies and also the sustainability for these companies as well. And how can we overcome and go through the changes and at the same time improve ourselves and also reduce the impact, mitigate the impact of disruption or cessation of businesses. This is something we have to focus on before speaking about profit. So sustainable return or long-term yield, these two aspects, the main keyword to get there is that how can we have to ensure that the companies in which we're investing will have the ability to really change, adapt to change, and also mitigate the effects as well. So these are the mega trends that we're facing, and I think that can really lead to a change for companies in which we're investing, and also it can create the sustainability for our fund flow as well. And another aspect that I perceive in terms of ESG for the companies that we're investing in is the development of the process in their operation process. For example, the reduction of energy consumption, the reduction of wastes, and also the focus and prioritization on personnel, the use of renewable or alternative energy, also the consciousness in terms of the awareness of social issues. These are all the things that all these companies will enable these companies to really live in the society and also have the sustainability in their business operation. And that is also related to profit, but it is more important than profit. And last thing that I think that is very important and the major benefit for these companies are, before we getting into the profit, I would say that ESG will bring about the risk management and also will downsize the risks in our operation. So personally, I would say that the upside of ESG is really great, and also ESG is not really, the benefits that comes with ESG does not. There are more to it than what I've said. It can reduce the risk, it can mitigate the risks, mitigate the impact of the operation of the company, and also can benefit the investment portfolio as well. So that's why ESG is a very important factor that will bring about sustainable investment and sustainable return as well. But in terms of the yield and profit, I would just go give my answer in the next session.
So it has been clear from our two experts that in order to be sustainable, I think it's worth investing in these. So as you see the overarching picture, which confirms that sustainable investment does not really actually yield good returns. So if maybe hearing from our third experts, maybe you can share with us your views, please. So actually, the first two expert has given a great example. Maybe I want to add a little bit from Kasikorn Asset Management. The belief that sustainable investment is bad for a portfolio. It may be because sustainable investment have limited funds and also the limited accessibilities. So sustainable investment may not really answer in terms of the returns. But if you notice and observe that sustainable investment is not using the negative list principle, but it's actually, recognizing the individual business criteria and how the company is performing and the risk assessment. And at the same time, I think we can actually consider new governance, for example, startups in e-vehicle or in healthcare, for example. So this is how we can actually expand our portfolio. So in terms of research, in connection what Kun Supaporn has said, So we found that Harvard has studied in 2018 that they actually studied 200 listed companies from their performance. And we found that return in investing of that with high ESG, they would actually very high return in general. And just given an example, in the 5 years, and with also the COVID situation, the fund that focused on ESG actually have actually better return than the benchmark. Thank you.
So thank you very much. That is also very clear and precise. So now I would say I would pass this question to Mr. Chakrit. So basically, if I just tune in and will be hearing first from Kun Chakrit, what would be the key takeaway based on the question about the whether the sustainable investing is good for the world but bad for portfolio. So if I just tune in, hypothetically, what would be the key takeaway that you would like to share? So good morning, and of course, in terms of investment and also investment, particularly in ESG, there are news that we can see that there is a restructuring, the merger and acquisition that we have heard from the news as well. But in terms of the benefits of ESG investment, I would divide that into three categories. The first one is I have the slide that I would like to share. The first one is the growth of the company. The second one is the productivity. And third one is the risk management. As provided by the first three speakers, that they have touched upon these topics already. So the transition of all these benefits, firstly on the growth aspect, the ESG practices will basically open new markets, will bring in new clients, new client base. For example, if we look at the original business operation, we may focus on energy. With ESG, we may move to renewable energy or alternative energy. So that is opening the new market. Or productivity, we will start to see the application of new technologies in order to bring about sufficiency and also efficiency of production, for example, to reduce greenhouse gas emission and so on and so forth. So this is the efficiency in resource utilization, and also the reduction of waste as well. So, and thirdly, in terms of, and also in relation to the relationship of the employees, employers, and for example, MFC, we just launched our company in China. In the first stage, we struggled a little bit with our relationships with our employees. For example, the welfare that we would like, or parental advantages. So basically, taking into account the social aspect will enhance or will enable the business to basically expand. And also lastly, which is risk management. As mentioned earlier by the three speakers, that risk management will also cover the management of litigation risks, and also, for example, Volkswagen that has been sued, that we can hear from the news relating to their greenhouse gas emission or carbon footprint, and they have been fined massively as well. So the risks of being sued will be significantly reduced. And also, if we focus on ESG, the focus and prioritization of ESG will also eventually affect the profit and yield for the investors as well through all these three pillars or elements that I have just mentioned. Also, we have to ensure that our business operation really cover ESG as well. So that is very clear. This is only the first question, and the four speakers answered in the same direction, that sustainable investing is not only good for the world but also good for the portfolio. First thing is that it's good for risk management, and also Kun Narongsak mentioned megatrend, and everybody agreed on risk management. So also Mr. Chakrit from MFC also mentioned the growth, productivity, and risk management. And I would say that this session, for this first question, we agree that it is not only good for the world, but also the portfolio as well. So I would like to go to the second question, that since we agree that sustainable investing or sustainable investment is good, so the question is that in terms of your own organization, what did you do in order to reflect the commitment of bringing about the sustainability for the country and the world, and what are the initiatives that your organization is doing? So I would like to just go to Kun Chakrit with this question, please.
So if you can put up my slide for MFC, as we are listed in we are a listed company, and we focus this and on this issue from the top down, from the board. So the overarching policy is that we have the Investment Governance Code, or I Code. So that's accordant with the responsible investment, working with the SEC. And this particular code actually covers 7 principles. But the important principle is actually having a clear, responsible investment and incorporating ESG as a part of decision making, and also incorporating monitoring process and working with the investors to do engagement. So secondly, MFC is also a member of Collective Action Against Corruption, or CAC. So there is a guideline to prevent bribery and corruption of all forms. Thirdly, we have the CG board that's appointed, because CGESG would actually have to require some expertise. So since we focus on this, we have appointed a CG board. And in practice, MFC, we have written out clearly that we have our investment philosophy. It has been stated that we need to do quantitative and qualitative analysis, and ESG is part of that qualitative study. Moreover, we have also developed ESG score matrix, and this will have to be a continuous development once we have more disclosures from the companies. And lastly, MFC have set up the ESG fund domestically and internationally. We have MFC Select, or MFCG, that's in Thailand, investing in Thai shares, and we ESG renewable energy, focusing on PGF Sustainable Energy Fund. So overall, MFC, we have committed from the top down, from the board level, and you can see that reflecting in our practice as well. Wow, that's great. There you have clear policy and practice, shows your commitment. You have code, you have board. That's very interesting. I think the GPF would like to consult you on about your ESG matrix. Maybe let's hear from Krungsri, Kun Supaporn. What are your strengths, and maybe you want to share with the audience today, and what kind of commitment do you have?
So please put up my slide, please. So we have our commitment in order to bring about the security prosperity and also sustainability for our clients. So basically, we focus on providing our investors with the financial literacy in order to develop their financial status. And also, one of the key points and one of the key strengths of Krungsri Asset Management is that we try to provide such financial literacy. We want to make them aware the importance of savings, and also we want to create this financial security for themselves and their families. And this has been an ongoing and long-standing commitment of Krungsri Asset Management. We provided trainings and seminars, and we also provide investment channels for the public through mutual funds. And these investment opportunities, we perceive it as the chance to build a financial foundation and also the long-term benefit for the country in terms of its financial status as well. So in terms of the organization, we already declare the application and adoption of I-code, and that has been set in our policy as well. We also include the ESG factors in our investment policy, and we have the anti-corruption policies as well. And thirdly, we have prepared and also provide forms on ESG to circulate the ESG form to to all companies in our universe, so that they can provide their scores in terms of ESG, and we engage with the companies in which we invested regularly. Our focus is to basically be the wind beneath the wings of all these companies. We want to ensure that they will have the social responsibility, and also to ensure that their operation is sustainable. What we are looking forward to doing is that we want to create the environment, the investment environment that will enable people to invest. We want to create the level playing field of all the investors with reduced capital, and also we want to make sure that investment planning is not something that is available only for financial or institutional investors, but also individual investors as well. So that will also lead to more sustainability and security of the financial system of Thailand as well. So that is very clear. So for GPF, we and also other organizations that are focusing on providing knowledge to the public, I think GPF will learn a lot from you, and I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this further. And also another thing that is very important is that the ESG questionnaire due diligence, I would say that the standard, I think what is important is the standard that the investment industry should apply, like as a standard, as the comprehensive rules. And I think that this can be another project of all of us that we can come to discuss and launch in the future. So security, prosperity, and sustainability from from Krungsri Asset Management. Thank you very much. So next, Kun Narongsak.
Thank you. I think Thai Panelists or SCB is committed similar to people in the industry, whether we have I-code and collaborative engagement. And how we see ESG, and just recently we have signed on with the UNPRI stating our commitment that we are committed. But I think what we want to see as real commitment is bringing ESG into practice. As asset manager, as a stakeholder, if we can integrate ESG into investment and quality investment into and generating satisfying results, particularly in the Thai context, in Thai shares. The question is, ESG investing in Thailand, is it something that we can rely on in long term, large endowment? So can I have a slide? Just to give example of the SCB Thai CG of SCB. Asset Management. So we have established this in 2017, and there's a 12.6% return. It may not look that high, but if you look at the next slide, that since 2017, the Thai capital market is experiencing uncertainties and very volatile, especially with an effect from COVID-19. If you pay attention here on this graph, you can see that our investment manager have dedicated our time to manage this portfolio, and we find that the ESG score or factor that we're trying to build with the agreement with AIMC would actually be able to weather this crisis and come out better than the other funds in the portfolio. There's a SCBBA fund that's the unconstrained, so it's the same analysts, managing these two portfolios, but Thai CG is using the ESG scoring. So we found that against the SET-TRI, the Thai CG actually outperformed the set up to 2.5% and outperformed set 50, that's 11%, and outperform the set TRI, 9%. So without the constraint, the others weren't able to match the return from this. So that's really a journey from SCBAM that we can conclude that in Thai market, ESG is actually a positive factor. And you can see that's really you can see how ESG has been put into action, and we have invested our time. If it's just small, like 300 or 400 million, so this is actually showing that we believe this is the portfolio of the future. It could be an interest of the institutional investors. Next slide, please. And ESG universe is actually very narrow because we have excluded some of the companies that have met the criteria. But using fundamental analysis and incorporating that in, we have that set of the universe of 71 stocks and consisting of good ESG criteria. So this is actually merging that two worlds and coming up with the group of companies that we prefer and we see potential. And this is something people are trying to do, whether it's ESG score or matrix. And I think this is something that will require knowledge sharing between stakeholders, but in the context of SCBAM, this is how we have been doing. Our ESG score actually leads to ESG quality. So we look at companies in their based on their quality factors, and we conducted our studies with leading universities in trying to find the great criteria for particular in Thailand. ESG in Thailand, what is the true meaning of that, and the factors relating to that. If we go in depth, what are the details? So we have devoted our resources and time in order to be clear on the criteria that would make up the way we make decisions. So I think this is briefly how we are committed to the ESG and how we want to put ESG to work in our portfolio, and we would able to produce results for our clients. And this actually shows that ESG is something that's a plus for sustainable investment.
So thank you very much.
ขอเรียนท่านผู้ชมที่ช
Very
ม
interesting case study. So I would like to just inform the participants that GPF is developing its own ebook, and also I would like to conclude and summarize the points presented by Mr. Narongsak about ESG. So I would like to just include the case studies provided by Kun Narongsak in the ebook as well, and I would like to just probably contact you in order to get the details. That would be my pleasure. So I would like to go next to Ms. Thidasiri with the same question, but for K Asset Management under your supervision, you have already adopted UN principle for responsible banking, but what about K Asset? What is your goal? Are you ready to adopt the responsible investing principle? So as you have provided, kindly provided, Ms. The Secretary General, so K Asset is part of K Bank, and we also prioritize and focus the sustainable business operation both for all of the E, S, and G. So all of the things that we do, we focus on sustainability, and we also have been supported greatly by the bank, by K Bank. So last year, we joined the UN Principles for Responsible Banking. We are a member organization under that principle, and and now K Asset is being encouraged to be part of the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, which will be happening in the near future. So the application of ESG in our investment, we have started this process 7 years ago. We have developed the policy on ESG to be used and applied internally, and also we adopted ESG as part of our decision making in terms of our investment. We have conducted the evaluation on ESG of listed companies that we invested in, and also we developed the practices that are related regularly, and we keep on updating these practices. We adapted and also adjusted these practices to make sure that it's up to date based on the ESG principle. And most recently, over the past 7 years, we have circulated the questionnaire, and I believe that I heard that you mentioned the questionnaire as well. So the development of questionnaire, basically, it can be considered burdensome in terms of the management company, asset management company, and I would say that we have only about 60 to 70% of responses of all of the questionnaires that we circulated. So we started to feel that probably this is becoming more and more of a burden for asset management companies. So that's why we canceled the circulation of the questionnaire to listed companies. But we created our own checklists, a very detailed checklist, and we basically attend the interview with the listed company, and we will just use the information or data from the public data and discuss all the information that we have acquired with them. And this way we got to interact with the listed companies, and it is one of the approach that we can enhance engagement with them as well. So in terms of the evaluation and the criteria based on such evaluation, we also create the mapping as well in order for us to score the E, S, and G pillars, and each of the industry will score differently under these each pillar. But either way, in terms of governance, I believe the governance is the most important aspect of ESG, because it will bring about the transparency of operation and also the good governance as well. So the rating that we rate for ESG, we will set the minimum at 30%. But for E and S, probably it can go as low as 15 to 20%. But for G, for governance, we weight that a lot, and we set the minimum at 30% for K asset. And for the establishment of mutual funds, in the past we established mutual fund, the K Thai CG IMF, and that is the mutual fund established by the collaboration of all 11 asset management companies, and we will consider what should be included in the universe, what should not be included in the universe. But for the foreign funds, we also established 2 funds as well, which is impact investing or K change, and AUM is quite large for that for the K change fund, and also another one is specific to climate, which is K climate. So this is just my key takeaway. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is very inspirational, and also that can bring about further collaboration. For example, questionnaire as investors, GPF also feels that it is quite burdensome as well, but we really do not have the solution to work around this particular task, but we will can further discuss in terms of how to basically reduce the burden in terms of questionnaire, and probably shift to have the checklist, and we can have this universal or uniform checklist that we can all apply, as a fundamental checklist for all of the players in the capital market. And this is very interesting. Thank you very much. So, so I would just go to the third question, continuing with Kun Thidasiri. So, as a asset management companies, what is the collaboration or coordination among ourselves in order to really enhance or really materialize sustainable investment and to refrain from having negative impact for portfolio returns?
So let me recap. I think in the past 5 years, the cooperation between asset management companies is very close. Giving some example, we have set up a CG fund from 11 asset management companies with the same universe criteria, which is called the Sovereign Mutual Fund. And also, we have also committed or signed up with the I code or the Investment Governance Code. So GPF is also part of this. And lastly, just recently, we have set up the ESG collective action committees with representatives from 11 asset management companies, which will actually enhance our engagement with companies that has ESG practice. And lastly, in connection to what the Secretary General has said about the questionnaire on how we can develop a common one, just recently this year, the association have had support from CBMS and MSP Thai and ERM. We have conducted a study and developed the ESG data framework. Because many asset management is experiencing the data challenges with the data collection. So in order to have this central data would actually release some burden to the listed companies as well. And next year, I think we're going to see the development. Wow, that's great. Really looking forward to that ESG data framework. Maybe I want to now come back to Krungsri, Kun Supaporn. So what kind of cooperation do you have in the pipeline? And what are your plans? So with the works through AIMC, and we have actually are all part of the ESG collaborative engagement, and we have the collective action, and we have engagement with the asset management. So it's really a force that would actually create some change to the market. Moreover, in many countries, many countries have incorporated the SDG goals into their strategy. So if you look at SDG in the context of investment, SDG can serve as a map in order for investors to find good investment. So there are 7 goals, right, in the SDG. For example, the no hunger, no poverty, good quality education, gender equality, clean water, clean energy, affordable energy, economic growth, and employment. So investment that's irrelevant with the SDG could actually lead to eradication of poverty and uplift the quality of life. So these listed companies will consider this, and I think it's going to be effective if us, as the investing institutions, would actually put our efforts together. And we have a framework in sustainably linked investment. And if we can actually meet that international standards, it would be perfect. And we want to see the cooperation that these listed company would actually work together and adapt to the changing instead of focusing on the returns. And I think this is going to be benefit for the companies and also long-term investment.
So for GPF, we are also in the process of developing the SAA, and we're trying to incorporate the goal 12 and 13 at the moment. So next, going to Mr. Chakrit. For MFC, what are the challenges, or what would you like to add further? So please put up my slide, please. So what we have conducted so far, one of the things that I believe that all of the speakers here are also encountering is the matter of data. In order to ensure that sustainability can really progress, what we need to do in terms of collaboration, and I would say that it is most important, is the data integration. So in terms of the listed companies, they have to understand this particular point as well. And what I would like to present is further to what Ms. Thidasiri has said. One of the most important things is the metrics, or to be to simplify, is the KPI or the key performance indicator for asset management and also listed companies, and also the requirement for these companies to basically disclose their data. Because from the research that we have conducted, a multi-party research, the ESG, if we want that ESG to have the positive yield, we have to set ESG as the material issue, or we have to focus on the ESG that are of material nature. For example, the SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, this is the organization that is responsible for this particular materiality map, because SASB also conducted a wide research based on financial impacts and also among other things. So this is just one of the points that I would like to present and get across, that these industries, they can provide different data. For example, the financial industry, one of the things that we can see more evidently in the dark red boxes, these are the systematic risks and also these are the financial crisis that basically, these risks are the fundamental cause or fundamental reason of all these financial crises. And also the mining or construction material extractives, minerals and processing. These also involves the risks of GHG emission, air quality, waste management, wastewater management, or healthcare. We can see the risks involve product safety. So based on these different industries, the risks are also different. In technology and communications, the risks will be other points. So these are the key indicators, or what we think that we should focus on in the collaboration of all these companies, all these organizations, whether they're the users of information or disclosure, or the person who disclosed these information, or they have to basically come together to reach an understanding what are the data that they're looking for and what are the data that they should be disclosing. So now we're focusing on data, the materials, the due diligence questionnaires, and also and so on and so forth. So for Kun Narongsak, apart from what the other speakers have already mentioned, what are other things that you think you can do in order to really bring about the sustainable investing? Please, something that have not been mentioned by other speakers. Okay, I'll try to not repeat the answers of other speakers. So for me, I personally, over the latest wave of COVID, over the last several months, I can see that the shares, the equity in, hospitals are benefiting from the expectation or anticipation of the incoming of vaccination or the increase of vaccination. So basically, this is just, a retrospective view. So what I think is that the shares in this particular group or the equity in this particular group, they are listed under the universe of ESG, whether or not. So this is just by way of example and just me looking back, and I see that the shares of the hospitals, only 2 hospitals are listed in the investment universe. So that brought the realization that the process of being ESG certified or being in the ESG universe, I would say that the first assumption that we have to ask is whether or not the listed companies know whether or not they know that they're implementing ESG or not, and whether they know the long-term benefits that exist under the implementation of ESG, whether they know about the benefit of capital allocation to these ESG implementing companies in order to enhance their adaptation. So this is just the first step to basically overcome to be within the ESG universe or within the ESG ecosystem. So this is something that the asset manager will have to engage, and also to tell them that we recognize the ESG implementation, and that is the main criteria for our selection of equity or securities. And we can basically publicly announce our policy or mandate that we are focusing or prioritizing the ESG implementation, or even more so if we already declare such a commitment on ESG. I'm sorry, there is interruptions and interference with the feed. Also, what we need to do more is with the investors. Investors will have to realize that they have more options, they have more alternatives in order to reduce the risks within their investment. These are things that we are seeing more and more recognition in the investment communities in Thailand. Also, we can see that there are more and more commitment from the stakeholders in terms of the long-term returns from ESG investment and also risk management as well. So I think this is something that will enable ESG in the practical level, and also connect ESG to the stakeholders, whether they are the listed companies or investors. And also, more importantly, I would say that if we, as the asset managers and also the universities, the endowment funds, if we established ESG dedicated funds, or others of with the same nature, and if we can put into action all these funds, this can be the movement. This will create impact to the social sector and also other stakeholders, and also even more so to the government sector as well. Sorry, there is interference and I cannot really hear the feed. The reception is quite poor. So I would say that we have to create the ecosystem that is more enabling. And I would say that this is not repeating the answers of other speakers. So thank you very much. That is very clear. The important thing is that we have to include all stakeholders. We have to include all value chains, the players in value chains, and basically the whole system. We have about 2 minutes left. So I would like to ask all the speakers to basically, you have 30 seconds to share with us your key takeaways, or your what you like to leave with the industrial sector in order relating to sustainable investing, starting from Krungsri, please.
So as the public and private sector is actually moving towards the sustainable development goal, I think it's going to be a driving mechanism that would enable finance industry to have the sustainable ecosystem that would benefit all stakeholders. What about Kasikorn, please? Some last words. So at the policy level, from the government, however, in the micro level, I think the government can maybe come up with incentives and tools to attract people to ESG practices, whether it's tax benefits for companies that conduct responsible investment. And I think it's actually would really benefit the company. Secondly, I think I do have several tools that actually promote sustainable investment. For example, the funds, if they are investing responsibly with the government company, it's going to generate the ripple effect. For example, there's an example from Japan and Norway. And my last point is actually the regulatory institution can support sustainable investment in many ways, such as coming up with a central database, creating awareness in terms of the and also maybe coming up with the KPI for the whole industry, and lastly, maybe appropriate sanctions. Thai Panit or SCB, please. I think I would communicate to the government to promote ESG, not through law enforcement, but maybe focusing on incentives and relieving some burden if these listed company would want to conduct or adopt ESG practices. And I think tax would be ideal. And I think generating this could really incentivize more companies to be on board. MFC, please. I think the government could play an important role in order to get more commitment, because the government can actually guide the private sector, and to get that buy-in for that long-term commitment. With the clear roadmap, the private sector can actually plan long-term, and the government could actually be a great example as well as this the disclosure of information, so the other people can actually follow along, and also the cooperation between various cooperation in order to gain that standard. So there's a lot to talk about, but we unfortunately that's the only time we have. So under this theme, sustainable investment, good for the world, bad for portfolio, has proven untrue. Thank you very much.